Hello there, peace be upon you. Welcome to Rational Religion, where we make sense of spirituality. In today's episode of Believe You Me, we're going to be talking about free will. What is free? What is will? All these questions coming up.
So I've actually had a close friend of mine personally, who maybe he's even watching this video, who's mentioned to me that he's a bit disconcerted by the idea that it could be possible that we don't actually have free will. And that, is that a thing? And, what do I think about it? And we thought, well, why don't we make a small video on it?
Yeah, and I think it's actually something that is increasingly a question that's agitating people's minds. Because it's the natural outcome of the dominant philosophy of our times, which is the philosophy of materialism. Materialism is basically the idea, not in terms of I want money, although that's part of it. Materialism in the idea that only matter exists and the only things that govern them are the laws of matter. So basically only the stuff and the things that, and laws which dictate how the stuff moves about and works exist. These are the only things that exist.
There's nothing non-material. There's nothing that cannot be broken
There's
down
nothing
to constituent
spiritual.
quarks and gluons and
everything is constantly divisible, and it's all just these unconscious particles moving in ways dictated by these laws of physics, wherever they may
But why would
exist.
that result in the idea that we don't have free will? Is it because when you have set particles and they obey certain laws, then we are effectively a conglomeration of those particles and those laws, then we are effectively pre-programmed, or as Dawkins says it, lumbering robots. He called us in The Selfish Gene. And Sam Harris himself has said very prominently that he believes that we don't have free will. And many individuals have said that as well, who are especially among the new atheist crowd. So is that the idea that because we're particles, we're nothing more, there's nothing about consciousness in terms of a spirit or a soul or something immaterial, which gives us a sense of agency and personality, which is unique in the sense of being something beyond matter, as we understand it in the scientific materialistic paradigm? Is that what it is?
I feel like you're asking me the question while knowing the answer is that.
I think so. Anyway.
So that is basically it. They believe that the world is materialistic, that there's no room for spirits or souls, and therefore they can't really say that we have agency and free will.
But we think that we have free will. So what they say actually is that we have the illusion of free will. That it's a trick that our minds or our bodies or whatever we played upon ourselves, perhaps to free us from the constraints of the sickening reality that actually we're just mindless robots. And that our choices are predetermined because of the things that we've gone through in our life, combined with the personalities which are made up from our brains, from which we have inherited from our parents, and so on and so forth.
So I guess the idea is that your choices are nothing but the interaction between your genes and things that you were born with and things that you receive from outside.
There's nothing more in terms of agency.
Yeah, there's no real me. There's no real person. There's just actually this illusion which your mind plays in itself, and that gives us this idea of free will.
So why is that a completely incoherent idea? What would you say to my friend, or what would you say to someone who brought that issue to you?
Well, how do I know that I have free will?
Yeah.
I think the way to answer this is to ask the question, how do we know that we have anything? How do we know anything, right? Now, knowledge is essentially of two types, as far as I can tell at least. So I'm going to break it down, and I think this is a readily understandable way of thinking about it. It's either things which are your direct experience of you, or it's the manipulation of observations and facts that you've got through your direct experience. So, for instance, the first type, direct experience is I can see. Okay? I can see things.
It's direct observation.
Yeah.
Or you hear something, or you touch something.
But it's not necessarily the thing that you're seeing. So, for instance, you can actually have some doubt about what you're seeing. If you're trying to recall in your memory what you saw, you might have some doubt about that. But you never have doubt about the fact that you can see.
Yeah, because it's the primary form of knowledge.
Yeah, it's it's your basic conscious experience. Yeah,
it's the infrastructure on which you build knowledge.
It's the canvas upon which the observation and facts are painted.
How many more metaphors can we use for this?
It's a vase containing the water of life.
Okay, so the point is,
it is the pocket containing the tissues of experience.
Okay, so basically, it's shut up. It's basically the infrastructure. It's the means by which we attain knowledge.
Yeah.
It's your primary observation.
Exactly. So these are your primary senses, right?
Yeah.
So this is your capacity to see. This is your capacity to hear.
Yeah.
This is your capacity to think. And I would bracket your direct experience of choice and agency in with those things.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when someone says, how do I know that I have free will? I would say to them, how do you know that you can see? How do you know that you can see? How do you know that you can hear? How do you really know that you can hear? How do you know it's not just a trick that your mind is playing with you? And if I asked you that, what would you say?
There's no answer. The fact that you can hear is the basis of all other knowledge, so you have to take that as your primary form of knowledge. Yeah. Otherwise, you would actually have to doubt the very inferences which led you to believe that you don't have free will.
Yeah.
And so it's actually a completely self-contradictory philosophy, because your observation of the universe leads you to the belief in materialism, which in itself leads you to the belief that we don't have free will, which in turn leads you to believe and to doubt the very observations which were the basis of you believing that we don't have free will.
It's like seeing something that makes you think that you don't have sight.
Yeah.
Or it's like, well, I saw lots of things, and therefore I don't think I can have vision because I saw these things.
It's an incoherent philosophy. So I think that really is a very good answer.
So it's a self-defeating philosophy. It's a self-defeating idea, and it means that it's basically incoherent. It can't be true. Because if you understand what knowledge is and you understand the structure of knowledge, you understand that you have to accept things of which you have direct experience and which are your experience.
Yeah,
language isn't quite able to describe it. Yeah, exactly. It's your primary. And to basically deny the primary based on the secondary and tertiary inferences on a materialist worldview which has got all these other problems and is very, very removed from your direct experience, and to make that doubt the initial thing, to make that doubt yourself and you, just seems crazy to me.
Yeah, I mean the highest form of knowledge is the knowledge of yourself.
Yeah.
In fact, it is the basis of your knowledge of absolutely anything else. It's primarily you understand you are. I don't know whether Descartes' philosophy of I think therefore I am comes into that. But
yeah, well, no, it's part of that. He didn't quite use in that context, but it's the same kind of thing.
So, I mean, what's the implications for our society, this materialistic framework? Because at the end of the day, this is something that if these people like Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens, they actually believe this claptrap, then their worldview should change profoundly, not just in terms of belief in the existence of God and things like that. It should actually change profoundly in terms of their interaction with the other human beings. Because the natural outcome of that belief is that you can't take anybody to task for anything. Because at the end of the day, if they were born with a set of genes, they had a set of nurturing inputs, they were raised in a particular way, and then they went on to commit this particular crime, how can you possibly punish them for it?
Yeah.
You can't.
No, absolutely
in actual
not.
fact. And you can't have any kind of reward for people for doing good either.
Yeah.
There can be no concept of good. There can be no concept of evil in actual fact. They're just simply things that are, right? And you shouldn't be angry or feel aggrieved at witnessing injustice. Shouldn't be a thing.
So for instance,
injustice should not be a thing.
Yeah.
It cannot be a thing.
So all of Christopher Hitchens is rallying against the church and against Islam. They're all completely incoherent with his worldview.
Yeah.
How can he say, this thing is evil, this thing is bad, and the great evils of religion, and God is not great? How can he say all these things while actually having a worldview which says that, all of the actions which led to this point or this state of play which he doesn't like were inevitable, and actually the people themselves had no part to play in it. I remember Richard Dawkins once said in an interview, he sort of, hand waved a bit and says, yes, I don't believe fully that we have free will, but I think, we feel like we have free will, and that's what matters. What? What does that mean? That's what a lot of atheists, they say, we have the feeling of free will, and that's really what's the difference? I don't really understand.
Yeah.
They're just trying to get out of it because they know it's a stupid thing to say, basically. But they also know that their whole worldview is tied up in that idea.
Exactly.
And as you say, it's the basis of legality. We should do away with the entire legal system.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, what's going to happen is going to happen.
Yeah, the worst genocides. That person was determined for it. He didn't choose it. He may have had the feeling of choice, whatever that means, but he didn't choose it. Choose it.
Absolutely. So
it's also completely unfalsifiable, actually.
Yes, it is. Because
what's the difference between the feeling of choice and actually having choice? How do you differentiate that?
So going on from that, what that tells us to a certain extent is that this materialistic framework and the implications of it for people's lives, and really this is an appeal to the viewer as well to a certain extent, which is that if you have a framework and a materialistic way of looking at the world whereby there's no place in it for your own primary source of observation and knowledge in the universe, then hasn't your framework and your view on the universe reached the moment of its death? Hasn't it reached the end point whereby it's actually become a self-contradictory philosophy, that you've got to such a place where you've actually denied and questioned the very primary source of all other knowledge? Like, that is a fantastic proof of the failure of that model, to take into account the very basis upon which all other knowledge is built.
Yeah.
And so I think...
in the name of rationality.
In the name of rationality. You know, so in a way, I think it has to be an appeal made, which is for people to develop their framework, develop their way they look at the universe, to include agency, to include something which is non-material, to include something which is, one might say, more spiritual, right?
Yeah.
Something to do with the individual and giving a place for that person's choices and decisions. Because often the people who have such thoughts, they're actually people who are very much aggrieved by injustice. They're actually often people who think very deeply about things. They're often people who actually do feel that people should have responsibility, and should take a responsibility for their actions. My friend who I mentioned earlier is very much a very conscionable and very conscientious individual who thinks like that, who thinks very carefully about the choices that he makes. And that's why he's asking that question to himself as well.
Yeah.
So I think that there has to be an appeal made to follow that instinct, right? And to incorporate within their worldview something which accommodates something spiritual, something on the basis of a person's agency, soul, or consciousness.
And I think it's right that their inference at the outset was that if we start letting in agency and free will, then we open the door to souls and spirituality, and we also open the door to spiritual communication and non-material beings.
Yes.
And that is a valid inference. That's what they're afraid of. That's why they shut the door at the beginning. They say, no, we don't have free will. Yeah. Because if we do, then we have all these other things that might come with it. Well, that's the situation. The materialistic worldview cannot be right. It undermines its own basis for all knowledge. So you have to open that door. And instead of being afraid of what comes next, you should embrace it. You should embrace the fact that you have agency. You should embrace the idea that you have a soul, something which you kind of intrinsically know anyway, that you have personhood. And you should embrace the idea that there are non-material forms of communication, that there can be non-material beings. And that is
people's testimony,
the inference,
and people's testimony that they have been communicated by these non-material beings.
Exactly, and it shows that perhaps you're potentially being a bit closed-minded by dismissing all that, because these things, so many people have said these things can happen, and actually the existence of souls and of spirituality is logically valid.
So I think that that's a nice point to end on regarding the framework of materialism. And hopefully we will see you in another video, which we will be producing shortly as well, on artificial intelligence. And that is intimately related to this entire discussion, because the idea that we're talking about artificial intelligence much more in today's society, because the idea is that, well, because we are nothing more than organic machines, once we become technologically capable enough, we'll be able to produce effectively versions of ourselves, something which is indistinguishable from human beings.
Yeah, so do we live in computer simulation, the existence of AI, all these kind of things we've been covering in future episodes. So make sure you subscribe to Rational Religion on YouTube, you subscribe to the podcast series, whatever you're listening to it or watching it on. And also head over to our website, rationalreligion.co.uk, where we have loads more articles. We're a little bit infrequent sometimes with the videos, but the articles are actually pretty constant. We have a lot of them coming out all the time.
Absolutely.
We've also got a big section on convert stories, so people who have converted to the Ahmadiyya Muslim community and their spiritual communications. We have a big section on messianic reasoning, where you have the full words of the founder of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, peace be upon him, whom we take as the promised Messiah and the reformer of our age and a prophet for our age. And you can read a lot of his work and his original words in full there. And he addressed loads of these topics far better than we can.
In terms of evolution, even life after death,
aliens, all these kind of things.
Some weird and wacky topics there too.
Okay, cool. Until then, peace be upon you.
Peace be on you.